In the heart of São Paulo, there was a legend among the street vendors about a cursed film that, once watched, would bring about unspeakable horrors. This film was whispered about in hushed tones. O Grande Assalto 11.6, Filme Completo Dublado, Filme de Ação Sessão Adrenalina Pura. No one knew where it originated, but the tale of its dark power persisted, growing with each retelling. It was late one night when Carlos, a curious and avid collector of rare films, stumbled upon an old, dusty VHS tape at a flea market. The vendor, an elderly man with a toothless grin, warned him in Portuguese, "Você não deve assistir a este filme." Ignoring the warning, Carlos eagerly paid the small price and hurried home with his new treasure. Carlos lived alone in a small apartment cluttered with stacks of DVDs and videotapes. His life revolved around cinema, and he prided himself on having seen almost every action film ever made. That night, with a bowl of popcorn and a sense of anticipation, he inserted the tape into his VCR. The screen flickered to life, displaying the title, O Grande Assalto 11.6, Filme Completo Dublado, Filme de Ação Sessão Adrenalina Pura. The film started innocuously enough, with a group of robbers planning an elaborate heist. The dubbing was crude, and the action scenes were over the top, typical of a low-budget Brazilian action flick. However, as the film progressed, Carlos noticed strange things happening. The room seemed to grow colder, and shadows danced along the walls, moving in ways that defied logic. Then, the scene shifted to the robbers breaking into a bank. The camera work became erratic, the images distorted. The leader of the gang, a man with a sinister smile, turned and looked directly at the camera. "Você fez, grande erro," he whispered, his eyes locking onto Carlos's. A chill ran down Carlos's spine, but he was unable to look away. The film continued, growing more surreal and disturbing. The robbers encountered grotesque, otherworldly creatures that seemed to crawl out from the shadows, their bodies contorted in unnatural ways. Carlos tried to turn off the VCR, but the remote wouldn't work, and the buttons on the device seemed jammed. Panic set in as he realized he was trapped, forced to watch as the film descended into a nightmare. The creatures on screen were no longer confined to the film, they began to seep out, oozing from the television and into his apartment. Their eyes were hollow, and their mouths gaped open, emitting a low, guttural growl. Desperately, Carlos tried to flee, but the creatures were relentless. They grabbed him with cold, clammy hands, pulling him towards the screen. He screamed, but no sound came out. As he was dragged closer to the television, he saw the leader of the gang standing on the other side, his smile widening. "Bem-vindo ao nosso mundo," the man said, and with a final tug, Carlos was pulled into the screen. Inside the film, Carlos found himself in the middle of the heist. The robbers turned to him, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. "You wanted to see the film," the leader said, his voice echoing unnaturally, "now you are part of it." Carlos ran through the twisted version of São Paulo, the city a nightmarish reflection of its real-world counterpart. The streets were filled with more of the grotesque creatures, their forms shifting and changing with each step. The sky was a sickly green, and the buildings seemed to pulse and breathe as if alive. As he ran, Carlos encountered other people, all of them trapped like him. They were former viewers of the cursed film, now part of its twisted narrative. Some had been there for years, their minds broken by the horrors they had witnessed. They begged Carlos for help, but he was as helpless as they were. Days turned into weeks, and Carlos lost track of time. He became part of the story, forced to relive the heist over and over. Each time, the creatures grew more vicious, the horrors more intense. He tried to find a way out, but the film had no end. It looped endlessly, a cycle of terror and despair. Back in the real world, Carlos's disappearance became a mystery. His friends and family searched for him, but all they found was his apartment in disarray and the VHS tape still in the VCR. No one dared to watch it, fearing the legend was true. Years later, the tape found its way back to the flea market. The elderly vendor, now older and frilier, placed it among his wares. A young woman, new to the city and eager to explore its mysteries, picked it up. The vendor looked at her with his toothless grin and said, "Você não deve assistir a este filme." But curiosity got the better of her, just as it had with Carlos. She took the tape home, excited to see what secrets it held. As she settled in for the night and pressed play, the screen flickered to life, displaying the title, O Grande Assalto 11.6, Filme Completo Dublado, Filme de Sessão Adrenalina Pura. And so, the cycle began again.